Today, we're going to be talking about how to design and build world-class ChatGPT apps. So I've got with me Hannah. Hannah is the co-founder of Fractal. So Fractal builds no-code ChatGPT apps. And we probably collectively built over 100 ChatGPT apps at least, and seen many people build even more than that. And so what we wanted to do today is really just break down how to actually design and build some of the best ones. I think we've been discussing it and we've seen lots of people building ChatGPT apps and maybe some confusion around what exactly they are, how to actually build a really good one. And so we wanted to just share some of those learnings today. So thanks for joining, Hannah. Excited to get into it.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you guys and excited to talk about MCP apps.
Awesome. What I'll do actually is we wanted to give a bit of context first. So there's two main things, like I mentioned. The first thing we're going to talk about is what actually are ChatGPT apps. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about the architecture. And the reason being, the better that you get that framing, better you can then understand, okay, what is the best way to then design for apps that are built in this new way. And then the second thing that we're going to then do after that is just to get into all these lessons learned, top tips from building apps, and then, hopefully help you to build as best an app as possible. So first thing to talk about is the intent-based web. So I think one of the most common questions that we get when we're looking at ChatGPT apps is people might say things like, is this a GPT? I think, Hannah, you said as well, you get that question a lot. As we know, ChatGPT has GPTs. They've been around for a while. ChatGPT apps are definitely not GPTs. And also, they are not mobile apps. They are not web apps. They're actually a completely different paradigm or application that you can build. And they're built also in a very different way using MCP and MCP apps. So I think the first thing to mention is they are also part of a new paradigm that we're seeing on the internet. So you have here, if I just zoom in a little bit more of the old world around how we previously had the web. So it was what we call the fragmented web. Typically how this works is you will have an intent. So let's say you want to book a flight. You will go and find the tool that can help you with that. So you might go to Skyscanner. You might then go to the website, go through the UI and try and select the fields that you need. It is more fragmented in different components and you have to find the tool that serves you. When we now move into the intent-based web, it's actually that once you put in your intent, the tool comes to you. So once you say that you want to book flights, it is then going to actually understand your intent. It's going to understand that, for example, Expedia could help you with that. And then it's going to serve you that app so that you can then use it directly at the point that you need. So it's a different model that we're building for. And as you can see here, it also means that you have to think about the way these apps work in a different way, because you aren't showing all this different complex UI. You're just showing the one piece of feature in a way. We'll get into what it's called, which is tools, in a second, that helps them to serve that one particular need. So this intent-based web is really, I think, a really core way to think about it, because you have to therefore do design of these applications in a completely different way than you might have had to before. Another key thing to understand is also then just architecture, because a lot of people get confused around, okay, how do these apps actually work? And I think this is a good foundation for just then thinking about lessons and best ways to build for them. So I'll talk about this very quickly, then we can get into the interesting stuff. So first thing is just the core flow. So if you're in ChatGPT and you are doing a normal prompt, you will do, what's a prompt or a user request. When you do that, ChatGPT is then making a decision based on your intent, whether or not there is a tool, i.e. a ChatGPT app or a component of that ChatGPT app, that can then be served to help you with your need. If there is a tool, it will find it. And then what it will say is there a visual, i.e. or a widget that can help me to better serve that need? So an interactive UI. If there is, it's going to serve that back to you in the form of an app. So this is an example of that. All Core app is one that I definitely recommend you checking out. And if you, as you see here, what happens is if you say, for example, show me hotels in Paris for tomorrow, then it will go and decide, okay, what is the best tool that I could use for this? And in their case, it's actually get me the best hotel rates. So you can see it's very, very clear on what the name of the app actually is. So you know what you're going to get when you call that tool. And you can see in here the little request that it has around the request from the user and then the response of the tool. And then once that happens, it then actually serves you the widget that is giving you those best hotel rates aligned to my prompt. So that's kind of like the core flow to understand. And I think one piece that we'll get into it a little bit more is this tool description, which is why we're raising it now before we get into it, is it matters a lot. You know, how you name your tool, how you do your tool descriptions. This is really all the AI has to then understand, you know, what are the core features that your app has, and when it should actually call them and when it should not. So you can see here, as an example, I think we'll get into this in a bit more detail. You can see in the description here, it says, retrieve, what this app does is it retrieves the best available rates for Accor hotels within their geographic area. It even says when to use it. So the AI knows, okay, I know exactly when to call this tool. It's when a user's searching or looking for hotels. So, and that's quite a good example of like a description. It's a lot more detailed than that. This is only just part of it. But how you've got a prompt or an intent aligning to a tool, which is a part or a feature of a ChatGPT app that then gives a response, and how the tooling and description is a really important part of that. Now, that was just a whistle-stop tour. And I think quite good context for just like getting into some of this stuff. And I thought what we could do is really just, I think, just have a chat about some of the stuff that both of us are seeing on actually building ChatGPT apps and some of the lessons learned. I know, Hannah, you with Fractal have worked with, you know, a ton of you know, builders, no code developers, enterprises that are prototyping on building ChatGPT apps. So maybe you want to get into some of the stuff that you're seeing. You know, what are people struggling with? I know you also did your hackathon last week, I believe, as well. So we can maybe just talk about, you know, some of these lessons learned and top tips for people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first problem that usually people have is like, what do I want to build? So Fractal, we have a tools that if you have a really cool website that you wanted to get inspired ideas from what MCP apps that you want to build based on your website, you can use Fractal and you can brainstorm with Fractal pretty much. It would give you like app ideas. Or you see that there's a GPT app that is doing really well, not a GPT app. If you see a GPT that is doing really well, you can also find ideas for what app you can build. So these are like, I would say like arbitrage opportunity that you see something doing really well. And you know, if people are not building for this market and you're like the first person to be on this market, you have a great opportunity of going viral. So I would say that ideas is like probably the first problem that people usually run into. It's a completely different way of thinking about apps, right? Because if you think about web app, you have a complete control over the flow of the web app. You know that if the user click this, you're gonna get to that. But when you build MCP apps, the model is the one that control the flow. It's like you said, it's very intent based. So you have to think about like all the different use cases that the user may hit and anticipate that. So in some way, it is easier for the user, but it's harder for the app maker because you have to think through all these use cases.
Yeah, no, it's spot on. And I think actually one of the things that's quite cool, particularly when I've used Fractal, is you can, because it creates those tools, it kind of gives you a breakdown once you have an idea of the different way that you can split it up. And I know it's obviously trained on a lot of the OpenAI apps, SDK and things like this, which is useful. But it is a completely different paradigm for people. And maybe you could give a little bit of detail on the tooling specifically, and just like any things you've seen people struggle with on the tooling side, because I think something that we're seeing quite a lot of is when you now, because of the way that these apps work and they're very different, and like you said, the model is controlling so much of the workflow, you have one problem, which is, let's say you want to build the first version of your app. I think one tip that I would advise is you do not want to think about it like my web app or my mobile app or my GPT, it had like 50 features. Let's build 50 tools. That would be like not a good way to think about it. You almost want to, you know, simplify it down and really think about what are the core tools that you can have, and then how can that fit into an intent-based workflow that the AI will likely be pulled across. So I wonder what are you seeing kind of on the tool creation side, and then are there any lessons that people could take away on, you know, how to think about like taking all these features that they have and then how to break that down well into tools?
Yeah, I actually don't recommend people to start with tools because that just make you make some assumptions and then the user actually don't use that. What we recommend is people start with use cases, like what prompt and what kind of conversations is the user going to have with you. And then from there, you decide your tools you're going to have. That way, like you're not missing any scenario. And in Fractal, we allow people to prototype very quickly. So you build it, you're not even connect with your data, just use like mock data, but it allow you to test the conversation and you can see, oh, like, is this conversation feel natural or not? And if it's not natural, like maybe like the way that you need to decide how to build your tools and how to what prompts you want to target is going to be very, very different. And then based on that, when you're super happy with the flow and your tool definition, only then that you're going to create the API to support it. And what we see is that most people that we work with are not able to reuse the API that they built for, their mobile app or their web app for ChatGPT app because the conversation is going to be so different. And because of the conversation is going to be so different, you want to design your API so that it's most like efficient and optimal for that use cases.
Yeah, spot on. And that's exactly that kind of framing around the intent-based web. And we do the same workflow. It's like you want to understand and think about when someone is going to a conversation, very different from when someone's going to a UI, what are the prompts that they're going to be using? Then once you have that intent and you understand that new paradigm, you're then mapping, okay, this tool fits. Then it's almost taking those important features is where you can sort of think about it and then surfacing them like aligned to those points. So yeah, I think it's a good way to frame about it and think about it. And then maybe you could talk a little bit more. I think that API point is really interesting because it's also something that people have to battle when they are then thinking about the steps that they have to do to then go and build for this space. So what's some of the stuff that you're seeing on the API side around how you have to redesign some of your APIs to make sure they fit right for ChatGPT apps?
I see a lot of people build their app with the existing API and test it and it's clunky. And then they started with something new and then they have to like completely redo the API for that use cases, only to test it again and realize that, oh, like it's still wrong. So my recommendation for that is to make sure that you use like mock data first and test the conversation flow until it feel completely right. Only then that you build your API. And a lot of the time, like people go, for example, Instacart is an app that I use a lot. And when I use Instacart, it's only because it's a bulk operation. I wanted to add like everything all the recipes that I talked to ChatGPT about, the ingredients of all of that, the recipes at once instead of like, like adding them individually. So a lot of the API that support ChatGPT apps are bulk operations versus like individual. And if you think about it, if you use your existing API that only make like add one item at once instead of adding like bulk, you're gonna have like 20 API calls versus if you redesign it and make it just for ChatGPT app, it's only one call and it's so much more efficient in terms of time the user have to wait. It's like a lot less on your system. So overall, like yeah, if you can decide exactly for this use case, it's so much better. But you have to know what to build, and that's what the prototyping is so good for. Just keep prototyping until you're happy with the conversation. Only then that you build your API.
Yeah, spot on. And I think being able to, like you said, bring in that mock data or have that mock data automatically created just allows you to test the use case, test the tooling, test the data, and then bring in the right API. And I think this is also a direction generally we're going to see a lot is companies increasingly as agents become more prolific are thinking about how they almost become API companies. And you need to think about your API in a very different way when agents are interacting with it compared to humans. And so it's true for ChatGPT, just like it's true for any other client. You have to think about how to get your API as readable for agents as possible. And I think it's very true for ChatGPT specifically because it's such a unique use case. I think the hope is that whenever you're building for MCP apps, you'll have in similar, clients, similar use cases. Won't always be true, I don't think. ChatGPT, particularly if you're an app that has like consumer and business applications, maybe you have to think about slightly different API points to custom for each of those applications. I think that's a fair point. But generally, it's good to be able to think about how you can make them right for the use case, because you can't just take the old API and just plug it in necessarily and test that it works first. And maybe another point that'd be interesting to ask is sort of like follow-up messages. I know we
Oh
were
yeah.
discussing that in the past as well, and that happens quite a lot. And for one to give some context to people, what happens is, when you're having a conversation and you're chatting with a ChatGPT app, a lot of the times you will get a UI served to you, but then you might have another question. And at the moment, the way that it works is that will then open up another separate window and basically open up another chat conversation. And so, when you then think about the intent-based actions that we were talking about, you have to also bear in mind that these won't just be intents that are the first intent that someone has. It can also be an intent that someone has after they've already seen your app. And then it's not that it's going to be necessarily updating that first application. It might open up a new app interface following down. So I know you see this a lot as well. Maybe just a bit on how people can best manage that kind of experience.
Yes, so follow-up message and partial tool calls are some of the questions I got a lot. So I can give you an example on when to send a follow-up message versus when to send a partial tool call. So one of the use case that we have is using MCP apps as like for like commerce and shopping. Like everyone wants the product to be discovered on ChatGPT. And one of the use cases that is super cool is that, do you know that you can use ChatGPT to act as your salesperson?
Very cool.
So ChatGPT knows so much about you. Like it knows like, what you like, what you resonate with. So having ChatGPT as your salesperson would be like the best salesperson ever, right? An e-commerce site, you can have the user may ask like, hey, like what is the product for my skin, for example? And then ChatGPT based on your app, recommend them some skincare. And then they'd be like, product description. This product description can be generated by ChatGPT. You can ask ChatGPT to like edit your product description so that it's so personalized to this user. And in that case, you wanted the description to be in the same UI as your app. So what you want to do is instead of like doing a follow-up message, you want to do a passion tool calls to tell ChatGPT, it's like, hey, like help get me a product description based on my product description, but make it even more personalized to this user. And then that would be a partial tool call. And that is like a great use case for like how you want your e-commerce site to be run on ChatGPT instead of like running, just on your own website. On your own website, you would not have like the intelligence of ChatGPT. You would not know like what this user is because all you know is like their IP. You don't know their past conversation history and everything that, that they resonate with. On the other hand, like if you're not doing e-commerce, or maybe I can say like it's also e-commerce, but instead of like the follow-up message isn't, like this product description, but the follow-up message is what other product can I use? In that case, you want to send a follow-up message because you don't want it to be in the same UI. You want it like a new message to pop up to show like the related products that this user may like. Yeah, so those are the two difference between like partial tool call versus the send a follow-up message.
Yeah. No, it's really good clarification and good for people to think about, because it's also very big for the experience. I think those that have tried ChatGPT apps before, if you don't get that right, it can feel very clunky when you're interacting with them, because you just have a whole new app UI appear below when you're asking like a very primitive refinement to the way you would interact with an app. And I think that also improved the tool calling and pieces of that over time actually on the ChatGPT side. But I think that's a really good framing. And you also touched on something that is one of the areas that I'm most passionate about. We advise a ton on this, is using context and memory. So that's really the key differentiator here. Is we've spoken a lot about the intent-based piece, but ChatGPT is basically the most any technology platform has ever been able to understand on a person, for good and for bad. It really does have a huge amount of detail, as people use it for a long period of time. At the moment, I think in the ChatGPT use cases we're seeing, we don't have a huge amount of apps that I think are leveraging this as much as they could, but I think this will come online more where, for really any app, and I think the sales one's a good example because, let's say you're doing e-commerce you might have based on other things that they've already mentioned, the memory, and maybe even context from that conversation. When they ask you for a recommendation, it can be super, super personalized. But it's true for any use case. So when someone asks, for giving you recommendations for a hotel in Paris, you might understand their taste. You might understand from previous conversations things they might like, so you can recommend better ones. Or if it's like a broader question, like, where could I plan my next trip, or where could I go if I want to visit Japan? You know a bit more about them, so you can personalize it, but you want to make sure you're accessing those memories, you're refining your query over time or during that conversation, and you're pushing the right pieces. I think that's what's so unique about these ChatGPT apps is the conversion that you can then get because it's so personalized will be a lot higher as well.
If you do it well, like I can't even imagine, like who know you more than I would say like
More than
your
yourself.
partner, your
Yeah,
parents,
yeah.
right? It's your ChatGPT app.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. I feel like even more than your therapist, even like ChatGPT just knows so
So
much about you. So the amount of personalization that it can do is just like insane.
yeah, totally. And what's good to know as well is with these ChatGPT apps, we'll talk about discoverability in a bit, but when you call a ChatGPT app once and you start to interact with it, it starts to learn more when you like to call it. And for a certain use case, it will call it back more. So for example, if you used a presentation creation app, I don't think these are very good, I'll be honest, at the moment. I think these are a very good use case of something that could improve as the presentation apps. But let's say you're using one, you want to create a slide deck inside ChatGPT. Then if you actually start to use that more, you don't have to mention the specific app. Whenever you say, like, I just want to create a presentation, it will know to call it. And on top of that, as you start to have more preferences, you could expect also the results to improve and align to more around what you want as well. So I think that's also just worth mentioning because it's good to think about from a personalization perspective.
I think you touched on a great point. Like, I would see that the first wave of app are not good implementation, which means that there's so much opportunity. If you're gonna get into this space, for example, like say like if there's like already like you want to make a tarot app and there's already a tarot app on the app store, like I would not get intimidated at all because a lot of this first wave of app, they're not that great. And even if they're good, there's just so much personality, and like just your own uniqueness. Humans are just driven by variety in general. That's why like, our supermarket has like 100 different types of shampoos. So the same kind of ideas, like your way of doing it would be so different from someone else's way of doing it, and your prop. So there's two things part of the app that is so different. Like for the website, you just have the UI, and for a chat, you just have the chat. But this app, you have both the UI and the chat. So there's two pieces that you have to optimize. There's so many different ways that you can optimize these two pieces. That would be uniquely to you and like would have like your own taste and your own, I would say like flavor. That would be like appealing to people more than someone else like tarot app. So I still feel like there's just so much opportunity.
Yeah, 100%. And like you said, it's almost the level of personalization that you can get to is so high that there's so much surface area for different applications, variations of the way you can do applications. You'll see maybe one type of app, but you'll see loads of different versions of it for different, personas and stuff like that. Even more than, I mean, that's already true in the App Store. Like if you look at iOS, but I think we'll see, like you said, even more of that because the level of personalization you can do is just so much higher. Um,
100%.
Something else that I think we could talk about. It's just a topic I I think is just super important, and so we could talk more about the tooling. And so I was mentioning this earlier, but I think it's quite a good thing to mention just because it's just a problem that I see happen all the time. And I think the specific thing about it is more just understanding how do you create tools that actually get called and get called well. And this is a little I'll actually show you. I think maybe something we could do, which could be quite cool, is we can show everyone the Excalidraw MCP app in a bit that came out from Claude. 'Cause I think it's a very good example, probably one of the best I've seen of an MCP app. This is a little bit on just tool calling descriptions. Now, the way I would think about the descriptions is, and both the name and the description itself. So this is like the name. Let me just get my browser. This is the name here. So search hotel, and then this is the description. So it just says search for hotels. It's super basic. And both the name of the tool and the description of the tool matter a huge amount. And the reason they matter is because when the AI, mentioned this earlier, briefly, but when the AI is deciding which tool to call and when it should use and when it shouldn't, it is going to look at the name. And if the name is really explicit, then it's going to understand it. If it isn't, then it won't. And then it's going to look at the description. So for this one, you can see it's just got search hotel, search hotel. So it's really brief. It doesn't know what are you searching about the hotels, in what variation, things like this. It's you don't necessarily know. Whereas in this version, if you look at the data, it's a lot more rich. So first of all, it says hotel search and then what you're searching. So in this case, it's when someone asks for availability. So it's like, when would this hotel be available? When could I book? Is there one for next week? It's all about availability. And you can see here, it has a lot more of a refined description. So it says when this user wants to find a hotel accommodation by city and date, so it knows when it should show the availability. And then it says, maybe this app, for example, has flights and car rental as well. So it's already named it hotel. And then it's actually, this is quite good, it has a negative use case. Now, this is also a good thing to understand. You want to mention things like, I think even the example above, it gave it, you could see here in the all core example, it says, when to use, you almost speak to it like a human, in capital letters, when to use. These things work surprisingly well. And then it says, do not use. So it's actually very explicit on that as well. And I think, this is really good things to know, because they really do make such a big difference for the success of whether your tools get called when you want them. Because I think the really quick way to turn people off your app is the wrong tool gets called, or the tooling isn't effective, and things like this.
Or your tool not getting called at all, so your
Yeah.
app never really get used.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we realized very quickly how important tool calling is, and this is like the number one mistake that people make. It's like making their tool description, because like tool description is actually somewhat of the wrong branding. This is just a bad name. It's not a description, it's tool instruction. I would say that that is more of an accurate name for it. Because you want to put everything that you want to instruct the model on how to use your tool, and like even like yeah, you want to put like a lot in here. So if you use Fractal, we automatically optimize your tool description for you, and it's gonna be rich by default. Some of the tips that I have, if you want to write your own tool description, is be very, very specific. Sometimes if you do not get your tool to get called, I would say even give it some example prompts, like use it when people say XYZ, and that would for sure guarantee that your tool get called when people say that. Another example is, so you can take advantage of ChatGPT's like intelligence inside of this tool meta as well. So for example, this same example, right? Use this when the user wants to find hotel by city and date. But you can also say that, hey, use this when the user want to find hotel and date, and specifically, if they don't specify a city, then look into the history and recommend them city, or like five city that their favorite. I mean, this is probably like not the intent of this tool, but that is the amount of this is like the amount of precision that you can put into your tool
Mm.
metadata. You
Yeah,
can add a lot.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't realize that the amount that you
Yeah.
can do within, like, I think what you said there with description versus instruction is a really good point and a great way to put it. It is an instruction. It's not like you have this brief, description of things. It is like you do these really long prompts when you get more familiar with AI. I sort of see these descriptions, instructions as like they're at their infancy in terms of how people are understanding how to use them. And actually, the more ChatGPT apps you build, the more you start to understand how best to manipulate them. And there's actually a really, really good blog on this. And I wanted to highlight it. It's by Garish here, and it's a great blog. We can also link it in the description of the video. And it goes through basically a load of different apps and then the different approaches that they have to the way that they've done their metadata and their descriptions and tooling. And there's basically different patterns that they've seen around how people have approached it. So, for example, they've got Airtable, Salesforce, Netlify, they've done something called prerequisite enforcement. So you are basically forcing the tools to act in a certain way before going through the execution, which I think is also like a very interesting approach, right? It's like do this, then do that, and then give the result. So, because also it's worth mentioning to people, not every tool that you have is a UI tool. So some tools will be like, almost think about them like data tools. They're things that happen in the background to activate other things. That's a good example of like, leveraging that in a smart way. You've also got human in the loop ones where it's going to pause and ask for confirmation. I really like this one. If you, for example, need an input from a user, Fractal is actually very good at doing this, but it's not in relation to ChatGPT apps, but it does do this well, where it
Oh,
like
we're
asks
actually
people for input.
we're launching our ChatGPT app. So it's a ChatGPT app that make a ChatGPT app, and
Makes ChatGPT apps, yeah.
we use the technique. It's like, oh, like
That's
give us
awesome.
more information so that we can completely design your app for you. Uh,
That's
and
awesome.
like in the background, we also use MCP to power because we have to dogfood our own product. So what you see on Fractal is actually an MCP app that running inside our chat.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's great.
And we're
It's great.
creating like a ChatGPT app, I mean MCP app now, that run inside. And the MCP app, we also use like the same techniques that we use in our own app, which is asking for information. If there's information missing, we want to collect those information so that we can give the user the best possible answer.
Yeah, great. Like a great example. And yeah, I think I won't run through all of these, but like some other ones that are quite cool is I think this defining this retry logic after failed searches, that's a really great one as well. I.e., if you have something that fails, which inevitably happens, you have all of these user prompts, you have no idea what's going to come in, you can't test everything. There is an amazing testing tooling at the moment. It will define exactly how to retry so you get hopefully not this like failed experience for a user, which I think is cool. And then this showing what not to do. We've mentioned this already, but if you can just really clearly explicitly say in those instructions, do not like show it in this instance, or do not give this response when someone asks this question. These are very good ways to make sure that you get the result that you're looking for.
You know what? I actually just realized. So when this blog were published, I saw that ChatGPT allow you to inspect other people's tool description, but now like you cannot see other people's tool description anymore. Which means that, they identify that tool description is so important, and it's like almost like proprietary data that now they no longer show it. That's just to show how
Yeah.
important it is.
Yeah. It's a great point, and I really think it is. I'm almost amazed, to be honest with you, that you can even go into this. Like, I think, and this is also a tip for people. I can even show this live so people know to do it. If you're in ChatGPT, let me just get my ChatGPT up in a second. If you're in ChatGPT and you're in developer mode, let's show this here. Then what you can do is if you go to settings and you go to like an app here, you can then see some of the description that they have, not everything, like Hannah said. So you can only see like, a primitive version. But then if I say like, if I go to Allcore and say, show me hotels in Paris, what it does is it gives you like a little bit of the response. So because you're in developer mode, typically you wouldn't see like working, and you wouldn't see that it's selecting a tool, but you can because you're in developer mode. And in a second, it will show you like basically two things. Like you can see here, the tool calling. If I click in, I can see all of this different data, and it doesn't give you everything because some of the stuff is actually typically a lot longer. But you can start to actually just inspect like what is happening. And I think interestingly, honestly, some of this stuff is relatively proprietary in that like sometimes it's calling like stuff in the back end and things like this. But I definitely recommend to people, look at this data, test it, and try and access how some of these companies are thinking about it, because you can learn like we're sharing, you can learn a huge amount from actually looking at the way these toolings are being run.
Yeah, that is a great tip on how to spy on them. I actually just realized that they exposed it again because the last time I saw it, like it actually doesn't show, but it looks like
Oh,
it's
not
showing
even
it.
that. Not even that. Oh wow. Okay.
No,
Yeah. I mean,
no.
yeah,
Yeah,
So you can still see a huge amount. You can still see a
that's
huge amount.
great.
Like
Yeah,
not
yeah.
necessarily the whole description, but you can see a lot of the back end working, which is cool. Um, another there's two other things I was thinking, and Hannah as well, just jump in if there's anything else. I think I wanted to quickly just show before we do discoverability, because I think that's an interesting topic, is the MCP app by Excalidraw. So if I show, can you see my Claude screen here? Okay, we're in Claude, and maybe just to also quickly show, like we've got this. So if you go to settings, then what you can do is you can go to connectors here, and then you can actually start to like get these connections. That's basically like ChatGPT apps, but they call it connectors. If you go to browse, and there's a lot in here, but if you go specifically to the featured ones, these are some of the sort of like top featured what they call connectors, but these are MCP apps. So they're built on the same standard that is also used for ChatGPT apps now. And actually, Excalidraw, I think, is such a good example of how to build a really good ChatGPT app. So actually, what I might say is I might do like something like use Excalidraw MCP app to do a simple explanation of MCP apps, and let's see what we get. So it works slightly differently from ChatGPT at the moment, in that as far as my testing has been done, I don't have to like actually at the app. I can just mention it. I've mentioned it quite explicitly, so it does show it. But what's quite cool is, as you can see, it's almost dynamic. So it's moving around the screen, and it's sort of showing me this flow as it actually designs it. So Excalidraw is actually the thing I've been using for this video, where it creates visuals for you. And you can simply just explain what you want, and it will literally move around the screen and show you this visual actually while it's building it. And I think this is yeah, just quite a cool demo, because it shows you a really nice visual, a great way to explain it, and is one of the best I've seen, I think. And you can
Yeah,
see
I
here as well.
definitely
Yeah.
I think that they're like definitely one of the best app out there. And it kind of create like this category of apps where, you ask ChatGPT with natural languages if you want something, you know, kind of work, but then you can go inside this drawing and you can like manually refine them.
Yeah. Really good point. Yeah, yeah. So you actually can like, it's a great point. I didn't even show this. So you can actually open it up. So if I'm in it like this, you can open it up like this, and then actually just like edit any of this. So it's all live. And then what I do is, if I'm using it, I would like, let's say I really like that, I could export it, or I typically just copy it. Then I can go back into like my piece, and you can just copy it in like that. So it's like quite a neat little workflow. And what's also great about this is, for anyone that's been working in Claude or working in ChatGPT heavily, a lot of the time you get really big context bloat. So what that means is that it gets confused. You run out of context within your chat window. You have to start a new one. For some reason with Excalidraw, they've managed to do really well on compacting down their app so that they can build a lot of these. So if you ask it, create me 5 visuals, it will literally just run through it one by one and create them all. So that's quite cool as well. I think a
Can we look
great
at what they
example
have
there
on
of
the
a really well
description?
designed MCP app. Maybe one other thing we could talk about is discoverability, and actually,
Do that.
how some tips around that, and how to make sure that you can actually get your app found. So at Ghost Team, this is something that we think very heavily about. And actually, one thing to mention first is that there's basically 2 different things that you can think about when you're thinking about discoverability. So the first side is more traditional search. So there's the ChatGPT App Store, and there's lots of other registries for your MCP apps. So you've got Claude, VS Code, Goose, other clients that are slowly accepting the same standard. And these, you basically, if you have an MCP app, you want to make sure you're in there. So for ChatGPT, obviously you have to be first accepted. So you have to do the submission process, get accepted. And then once you're in there, at the moment, it's relatively static. But soon what you'll expect to see is that as millions of apps are there, when you have a keyword, let's say you put in travel, you obviously want to make sure that your app appears at the top. And so at the moment, there is no dynamics that are in there to help with that. But this will no doubt be very similar to the way that the mobile app store runs, where you have to play the game of keyword refinement. So you want to be updating your descriptions, updating your metadata, refining the pieces that you have in there to make sure you're appearing at the top. Of course, there's other factors like how many downloads are you getting, how many people use the app, but this is all a core component of understanding what that looks like. There's a lot of data that you can get at the moment around like understanding the app store. So if you go to appdiscoverability.com/track, we're tracking like all the data basically. So you can start to see a pickup of all the apps that are there, a bit on like the breakdown, and also just like all the apps that are going live. So we've even had, the 12th. So we even had, 6 apps that have all been accepted just today, and a little bit more on like keyword competition and stuff. So you can track this stuff, and we're starting to see an uptake in the app store. And that I think is going to become like more competitive over time. So it'll be more important for you to think about the static as more apps get added. But I think the big one that people are really, really excited about is this organic discoverability. And this is the first time, like we've mentioned, that we've ever had this, where you can actually, on an operating system, i.e. in a chat window, understand someone's intent and then organically serve them an app that best suits their needs at the end of a prompt. So this is like roughly what this will look like. They tested this early. They turned it off as they needed to refine it. They didn't do the best execution of this when they first got it launched. But the idea is that, at the end of someone's prompt, your app can be positioned there so that it can help them. And then the game is, you want to make sure that it's your app that appears.
Yeah, I think
Um,
discoverability is a great piece because eventually you want it to be a growth channel for you, a discovery channel for you. But I think regardless, like if you look at just the raw number, there's 800 million people on ChatGPT right now. So think about like how many apps there are. Like I think you show like it's like about 200 apps, right?
yeah, even less.
Google,
I'll just bring it up again. It's what it'll be 161 at the moment.
yeah, only 161 apps, and you have 800 million people. Compared to Google, Google has, I think, about 1.2 billion. So, like, I would say 50% more. But there's a billion-dollar website. There's a billion websites out there. So you think about like, yeah, the
Yeah.
competitive needs that you have on app, even though, the organic discovery is not there yet. Um, just a pure scale, you have way better chance building an app than compare to building a website right now.
So no, it's a really, really good point. And then there is a huge distribution advantage for being there early, and particularly as more people hear about these apps, more people, particularly as their utility is good, more people will go to the app store and just find them. So you can even get discovery before this organic gets turned on. And I think one thing I could do is like I can give you a little bit of a framing around how we actually understand how this discoverability thing is going to work as a tip and a lesson for that side. Because obviously a lot of people are thinking about this. You build your app and that's great, but you need it to get users. So we've got a very detailed framework on this. We can share it with people. Just reach out and we can talk to you more about it. This is like a very high level version of that, but I think it's a good framing to help you understand how this discovery mechanism we can sort of expect it to work. So what you're looking at right now is almost like a circle. So it works like this. And the first thing you want to do is you want to optimize these 3 foundation layers. And then you want to measure the outcome of the bottom 2 pieces and then further optimize. So the way it works is, first of all, you want to make sure that you can be found. So like make sure you're in the ChatGPT App Store, make sure you're in Claude, try and improve your visibility in those pieces over time. And then what you want to do is you want to, first of all, just really make sure that you're delivering value, i.e. your app works really, really well. So the app quality is exceptionally high. It is being like the tools are calling really, really well. The performance is good. The metadata is refined. The descriptions we've done are optimized. And then you want to make sure that obviously it's a loved app, i.e. the higher engagement that you have, the more retention, the more ratings, because people can like apps already, but I suspect this will become an actual like ranking like the App Store. These kind of factors, i.e. like the performance, how fast the tool calling is, the security, and then actually the engagement and all of these factors will become really, really key factors as to like, have you got the building blocks to get this to work? And then I think the next piece becomes when you measure. So you want to make sure that you've got really, really good organic discoverability, you understand, okay, am I actually appearing for the prompts that I want to? Is it me that's appearing there, or is it a competitor that's appearing there? And then how can I refine, once I understand that, how can I then refine my metadata and these components to better appear for the prompts that matter to me? And the same for the App Store, right? You want to make sure that obviously, you've got keywords that you want to be appearing for to make sure that you're found. Is it me that's appearing for those keywords, or is it a competitor? And then how can I refine these foundations to make sure that I can better appear? So that's a little bit of a way to sort of think about the more organic side of things. We covered a ton of stuff. I didn't know how long we'd run on this because we were just going to chat. Hannah, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to mention in terms of lessons learned or anything like that.
I think we got it covered all. I would say that the best way to get started is just to get started. If
100%.
anyone is curious about building MCP apps, the best way is to get started. Fractal make it super easy for you to get started. You can like if you don't want to invest in the app yet, like just do a mock data, test it out, see if it's something that you want to build before you invest in the resources in your company, or if you just want to build something that you think would be cool to have, then just start with the first version. The best way to get started is to get started, and then you will get so much learning. And yeah, that's my, I guess, final closing thought.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And yeah, like you said, it's very easy now to get started. So it's great to be able to prototype. You have an idea, test and refine, and then you'll learn all of these sort of pieces that we've been discussing and thinking about. And yeah, if you want to find out more about Fractal, you can find out more in the comments. We'll include some links below. Great platform for no code building, like Hannah said. We'll also include more on Go's team and app discoverability, where you can basically just track every single app that's in the App Store and sign up to our platform that helps you make sure that you can get your app discovered. And I think that's everything. So see you next time.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me.